Hi folks, you are now listening to Hello China at 103.2 Dublin City FM. The program is co-hosted by UCD Confucius Institute for Ireland. I'm Tim, producer and presenter. Today, as we said last week, we also have Risteard O Deorian in the studio to share his more than 10 years working and living experiences in China with us. He went to China in 1998, and now he's a very famous presenter in China Radio International and China Central Television Station, which are the most popular radio and TV station in China. Last week, he told us how to find an English teaching job as well as how to learn Chinese. And today, we will bring you more tips for working and living in China. Hi, Risteard.
Hello. Hi, everybody.
So, what kind of programs are you doing now in China?
I work on two main shows. The first one for CCTV 10, which is Science and Education. And the show is called Outlook English. Now, the name obviously gives it away, Outlook English. It's something to do with speaking English.
Yes.
Essentially, it's a travel show. We travel around China to various towns and cities, big and small, and discuss the local culture and cuisine.
Really discuss the local culture and cuisine.
Yeah, so we go to an area and talk about like all the beauty of that area, the natural beauty. Maybe the area is famous for some kind of local cuisine that's only available from that area.
You know that much about Chinese culture?
I know nothing. However, I am a very quick learner.
Okay.
No, there's far too much to know. I couldn't possibly know about every single local cuisine, but we go to these places and we talk about the cooking style, for example. We might talk about something that the city is famous for, like industry. It might be the birthplace of paper, for example, in China, or it might be where the first rice wine came from, or it might be known for its beauty, or natural beauty, or natural spring, for example. And during this traveling, we would also introduce associated words in English. So if we're talking about an area, we might talk about it in English. We might say for example, in Chinese, we might say 这个地方很美,这个风景很迷人. It's like breathtaking scenery. Yeah,
yes.
很迷人. We'd introduce the English.
Oh,
say,
okay.
如果用中文说就是迷人，那英文怎么说呢？哎呦，那就是 breathtaking. 哎。就这样教。
Oh, breathtaking.
There you go.
I got it.
There you go. So that'd be an example of how we'd actually teach. Although, to be fair, there isn't a lot of English in the show. Even though it's called Outlook English, I'd say less than 5% of the content of the show is in English. Less than 5%. It used to be the other way around. It was less than 5% was in Chinese, and the remaining 95% was in English. But times have changed, and producers have changed, and also marketing for the show has changed as well. So now it's the other way around. It's mostly Chinese with a tiny bit of English in it. But it's an interesting show to work on. And the other show is on radio, CRI, which stands for China Radio International.
Yes.
And the show is called Foreigners' Viewpoints. 老外看点.
Okay.
And it's basically talking about interesting news from inside and outside the PRC. I feel like I'm in work now.
Yeah.
And we'll be talking about, current events, news and current events, and things happening on the internet. We need to talk about new technology. You might be talking about changes in China's policies, particularly related to education and foreigners as well. Because there are lots of policies related to foreigners. So we might be talking about things like foreign investment in China. We might be talking about what are we talking about? Things that have happened on the internet.
It's just nothing is off limits.
Well, lots of things are off limits, but we don't talk about that.
Oh, okay.
No, but yeah, it's fairly broad spectrum of news and current events.
Actually, I think that you don't have to be an expert on Chinese culture if you want to work and live in China. Just for example, me, I have been in Dublin for only 5 months. I'm not an expert on Irish culture, but I can still live happily.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so
good.
So I think there's just some certain rules that you need to know to work in a new environment, right?
Yeah.
So would you please give us top 3 rules for living in China?
Top 3 rules for living in China.
Yeah.
Be thick-skinned. 脸皮厚. Be thick-skinned. Don't worry about things too much. No, I think the first rule I could say is have a sense of humor. And at the same time, a sense of...
You definitely have it.
Thanks. A sense of humor and a sense of perspective. Try not to take too much on board, because living in China can be overwhelming for the senses. Everything looks, sounds, smells, and tastes different. So you might find it a bit too much to deal with. Also, coming from Ireland, which has a population of like 4.5 million, to moving to Beijing, we have like 50 million, or how many million, there are probably more than 50 million. It can be overwhelming when you see so many people in such a small area. So take things into perspective. The second thing would be to try new things. Don't be afraid to try new opportunities. Work-wise would be one. Another field we could try new opportunities would be meeting new people. Always be willing to meet people.
Yes.
Because you never know who you're going to meet.
Yeah, you got a lot of chance opportunities.
Exactly.
By doing that.
In Chinese,多一个朋友多一个出路. Like one more friend, another road.
Yes.
Which is basically an opportunity. New friends, new opportunities. That's what that means.
Yes.
So I've met some very interesting and diverse people, from captains of industry to ordinary people on the street, and people working in TV and radio, and people working in various NGOs, and all sorts of different organizations, both inside and outside of China. So it's always interesting to meet people. You meet some nice people, and you meet some not so nice people, but always be willing to try and make an effort. And another rule, I would say, would be try to learn the language as quickly as possible.
Yes.
Because that rule will pay you no end in reward, because if you can speak the language to a level of comfort where you can negotiate your own salary, for example, if you're looking for a job, since that's what we're talking about, you will find it a lot easier to negotiate in Chinese than in English, because there's a lot of miscommunication due to language barriers, and it can, because of the miscommunication, it can lead to a lot of misunderstanding.
Have you ever made any mistakes because misunderstood the culture difference?
Oh, absolutely, hundreds. I'm still making them now. But particularly though for the first time visitor to China, if you have, although it's difficult, but if you have a Chinese foundation, if you can speak a bit of Chinese when you go there, you'll find it a lot easier than somebody who doesn't speak any. Because I know people who speak very good Chinese and who don't speak any Chinese. And I've often found that those who don't speak any Chinese are often annoyed. They get angry very easily.
True.
And it's mostly down to cultural miscommunication. Because I give you an example. In Chinese, when somebody says, 我知道, like it means I know. However, this I know doesn't mean I know, like 我已经知道了，不是我已经知道了，是我知道。There's a difference between saying I know in English than there is when you say it in Chinese. However, if a Chinese person, just says I know in English, it sounds to the other person like they already knew what the question was.
Yes.
So why then are they asking it? Like, for example, if I was explaining to you how to do something, and you said to me in English, I know, my response would be, well, if you already know, then why are you asking me? Well, that's
quite interesting.
Yeah, but that's not what you mean. You're like, 我知道了.
Oh, yeah, I got it.
Yeah, it means, now I understand.
Yeah, now I understand.
But that's just an example. That can lead to a lot of frustration.
Yes.
And, so that would be the golden rule, is learning Chinese.
Okay, but I think things are better than 13 years ago, because if people want to go to China now, they can have some language class here before they went to China.
Yes, definitely. And also the internet as well is a great source of material.
Yes.
You can go onto YouTube and you can get language classes free, and you can see people
You can listen to our program, because we teach Chinese.
There you go, you can listen to our program. Very important thing.
But I think one good thing about the big cities in China like Beijing and Shanghai is that that all places can provide English language service. So you won't have troubles to go to the restaurants or go to the hospitals, right?
The situation has changed dramatically, particularly in larger cities like Beijing and Guangzhou and Shanghai and all these places. Most of the areas that you've already mentioned, such as hospitals and train stations, have English-speaking staff. So even if you don't speak any Chinese, you can still make yourself understood. And also, the subway system in Beijing and Shanghai is bilingual. The maps are in English. Some of them are actually in Korean as well. There are a lot of Korean residents in China, particularly in the north of China. So you sometimes see public signs in Chinese, English, and Korean, depending on where you're going, I suppose.
So, a lot of friends ask me about the visa issues.
Yes.
Do you have any problems to get a visa to work in China or live in China?
Well, to get a visa to work in China and to live in China are two different things. China has a variety of visas. The easiest visa to get would be a tourist visa, which you can apply for at the Chinese embassy.
Yes.
Here in Dublin.
Yeah.
It usually takes, I think, about a week or something before you can get it. That's just a straightforward 30-day single entry visa, which means you can go to China and come back. Then you can have things like a business visa. There are a variety of business visas where you can go for business meetings, short term, medium and long term, and you can have single or multiple entry, which means you can come and go as you please. For a lot of people traveling from China to an onward destination, that would be their visa. You can have visiting relatives visa. You can have a working visa. But the working visa you can only obtain if you have been invited by a company or organization in China. So you have to be outside of the country, outside of China, before you can apply for the working visa. What you get is a letter of invitation, which you then take to the Chinese visa section, visa office.
So if people want to apply for a working visa, they should try to apply for a job online before.
Yes, you get a job. And the employer that's their responsibility, is to provide you with a letter of invitation, which you take to the visa office here in Dublin, the Chinese visa office, and they take that letter of invitation and they give you a working visa. And the working visa is usually valid for 1 year and multiple entry, depending on the situation. Usually it's 1 year multiple entry, so you can come and go as you please. And then when you arrive in China, you also get what's called a 专家证. It's like a foreign expert's card, which I don't know what
Sounds pretty cool.
I don't know what that means, actually, because I'm not an expert. I'm a foreigner. I'm an expert foreigner. And that's basically like a working passport. And on that you have, I've never actually used mine. I used to use the visa, but sometimes, actually I think they're probably getting rid of that because it's quite an old system, the foreign expert certificate. But basically what that means is you are a qualified person in a particular field, and as a result of that you have this card which says that your salary should not be lower than a certain rate.
Well, that's a good thing.
It is a good thing. However, the rate that they have set is quite low. So it's just it's like minimum wage, where you can get paid a lot higher if you go to like a private company. But it's just probably a throwback to the old system of foreign experts. That word is used in Chinese quite a lot. 专家. 外国专家.
Yeah.
I mean, I was a foreign expert the day after I arrived in China, and that's impossible because I had just finished college. I wasn't an expert in anything. You know, so I was called a foreign expert, so I thought that was quite funny.
Maybe they just want a good name to attract people, you know.
Yeah, it sounds good. You're a foreign expert.
Yeah, you are an expert.
Yeah.
Okay, so if it's very easy to get a tour visa, so probably it's better to go to China and to say what China is like before you decided to go to work in China.
Yeah, definitely. You could go for a 2-week holiday, for example. I mean, China is a massive country.
Yeah.
There's so much to see. You'd have to plan your holiday in advance where you want to go. If it's your first visit to China, I would recommend going to Beijing, starting in Beijing, or Shanghai. Beijing and Shanghai, even